need them, you want them. But the question is, why do you feel so compelled to take your opinion and share it with someone unsolicited? Follow the rest of your day and ask this question. How often do I want to tell people what I think and they haven't asked me what I think? They haven't asked for my opinion. What if I could go a day and have all the opinions I want? I love to have opinions, but I don't feel compelled to share them. Why do I feel compelled to share an opinion that hasn't been asked for? Answer, because I feel the need to be right and to prove that you're wrong. What if I didn't need to feel that I needed to prove to you that you were wrong and that I was right? What an interesting idea. The next idea that he will say is a very famous and maybe the most famous concept from the Meditations, and it runs like this in different translations. Soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you. Oh, of course, some of you are smiling. You know this line, right? For example, when we do Percy Bysshe Shelley's Ozymandias, there it is, right? Soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you. Wow, what a compelling idea. I've had students that put that one on a poster and stick it in their locker to think about it. How about this one? Occupy thyself with few things, says the philosopher, if thou wouldst be tranquil. It seems that probably he's quoting Epictetus, right? But consider if it would not be better to say, do what is necessary, and whatever the reason of the animal which is naturally social requires, and which comes from doing as it requires. For this brings not only the tranquility which comes from doing well, but also that which comes from doing few things. For the greatest part of what we say and do being unnecessary. If a man takes this away, he will have more leisure and less uneasiness. Accordingly, on every occasion, a man should ask himself, quote, is this one of the unnecessary things? Now, a man should take away not only unnecessary acts, but also unnecessary thoughts, for thus superfluous acts will not follow after. We have to, and we'll say this at 3A when we're making observations to other texts, we have to, of course, assume, don't we, that Henry David Thoreau probably had this in mind when he says in Walden, his classic journal that he wrote for himself. Sound familiar, right, with Marcus Aurelius? I went to the woods because I wished to live. Remember these lines, right? Deliberately. He says it to front only the essential facts of life. What do you really need to be happy? Marcus Aurelius challenges himself to ask that question about any given act, about any act that you are going to commit. Ask, do I really need to do this? Now we're back to our energy conservation model, right? And of course, takes us back to Plato's Apology. The unexamined life is not worth living. Let's keep working. How about this one? Everything is only for a day, both that which remembers and that which is remembered. In other words, don't make a big deal, too big of a deal, out of a single event. And remember that your life is a series of these challenges. So no event, no matter how catastrophic, can end everything for you. No way. He says it as a man who is accustomed to fighting in battles where he could even die. Everything is only for a day. How about this one? I'll play this game with you. This is a famous passage from Meditations, Book 5. Again, the 12 books, Book 5. This is some of the most famous lines. And it asks this question. How do you wake up in the morning? What is it that you do in the very early, very first moments of the day? Many have said that how you think and how you act in the first minute or two after you awake in the morning will determine your entire day. Marcus Aurelius will say this. In the morning, when thou risest unwillingly, he's literally writing this to himself. When thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. In other words, he wakes up and he goes, oh, I don't want to get up this morning. Sound familiar? Right. Sound familiar? In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? Or have I been made for this, to lie in the bedclothes and keep myself warm? But this is more pleasant. I mean, you can hear him, right? Wanting to roll up in his blanket. But this is more pleasant. Dost thou exist then to take thy pleasure, and not at all for action or exertion? Dost thou not see the little plants, the little birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees working together to put in order their several parts of the universe? And art thou unwilling to do the work of a human being? And dost thou not make haste to do that which is according to thy nature? But it is necessary to take rest also. He's having a dialogue with himself. Yeah, but I need to sleep. Notice Marcus Aurelius going back to nature here saying, hey, look at the ants, look at the bees. They don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, another day. No. So what about you? Why are you still laying in bed? Let's go. Get up. Let's face the day. You'll remember that Thoreau has some comments in Walden about the importance of getting up and facing the day. He'll even say it. How can I look a man in the face who hasn't learned to honor the morning, to get up in the early morning hours? Here he says it, notice. But it is necessary to take rest also. His counter response to that is, it is necessary. However, nature has fixed bounds to this too. She has fixed bounds to both eating and drinking, and yet thou goest beyond these bounds, beyond what is sufficient. Yet in thy acts it is not so, but thou stoppest short of what thou canst do. So thou lovest not thyself. For if thou didst, thou wouldst love thy nature and her will. What a compelling idea. To love yourself, for Marcus Aurelius, is to take care of yourself, and that means challenging yourself. In the early morning when you wake up, be ready to go to work. And work well. Wow, what an interesting idea. Well, let's keep going. We'll finish with some observations from other parts now of Meditations. He says this, adapt thyself to the things with which thy lot has been cast, and the men among whom thou hast received thy portion, love them and do it truly, sincerely. In other words, whoever is there with you, treat them well. Whoa, that alone could change the way maybe we live our lives. Or what about this line? Allow this one to challenge you. Think of thy last hour. Let the wrong which is done by a man stay there where the wrong was done. In other words, when people treat you badly, remind yourself that if this was the last moment of his or her life, they probably would treat you differently. In other words, forgiveness is linked to perspective. Have the right perspective, and then you won't hold things so often against others when they treat you badly. We'll finish with just a couple of more lines that I like. How about this one? If a thing is in thy own power, why dost thou do it? But if it is in the power of another, whom dost thou blame? The atoms, chance, or the gods? Both are foolish. Thou must blame nobody. For if thou canst, correct that which is the cause. And if thou canst not, do this, correct at least the thing itself. But if thou canst not do even this, of what use is it to thee to find fault? For nothing should be done without a purpose. Now that's a compelling idea. Blame no one. Often it's been said that Stoic philosophy is, not don't be a wimp. It can be comprised that way. Blame no one. How about this one to finish? A final line. And obviously, guys, I could go on and on with this, but we've got to draw to a close. So I'll give you one final line. No longer talk at all about the kind of man that a good man ought to be, but be such. Whoa. To be. Or not to be. That is the question. There it is, isn't it? Brilliant, isn't it? Yes. Don't talk about being a good person. Don't wish you could be a good person. Don't wish that you could be a person who's dedicated and disciplined. Be that person. Enough thinking about it. Enough talking about it. Enough wishing for it. When will you actually begin to live the life that is your life? Remember what Thoreau says in that famous passage we were quoting before. I did not live wish to live what was not life. He says it, right? Living is so dear. Let's finish now with some level 2A observations, messages, and themes. Of course, we could just simply say it this way. Marcus Aurelius is challenging himself, and by extension challenging us, to live those 4 cardinal virtues of Platonic thought, right? Wisdom, courage, temperance, discipline, and of course, justice. What's brilliant about Marcus Aurelius from the Meditations is that he challenged himself to live this life even though he didn't have to. He was an emperor. He had the total freedom to do anything he wanted, and he challenged himself to live the good life. Whoa. There's a model worth, I think, taking a look at. Some have said that you can simply reduce all of Meditations to don't worry, be happy. And it sounds so cliche-ish that it's kind of lost, and the challenge of Meditations is lost. But we'll go ahead and write it down because it makes us all smile. Don't worry, be happy. How about this one? You'll maybe remember from your study of Buddhism that it was the Buddha who said, everything you are is a product of what you have thought. We often can't control the things that are going on around us, but we can control the way we think about those things. This is pure Stoic philosophy as well. How about this for the biblical readers in the house? Remember that passage, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. The same idea, of course, is going to be mentioned as well in the Quran. The idea that if you are going to do something, why not do it well? Why not define yourself as an individual who wants to do things well? Great idea, great challenge. How about a 2B? Let's study just a little bit, not what the author says, but how the author says it. This is the rhetorical stuff that we look at 2B. Notice that again, it is a book or a letter, we might say, to oneself. It is journals. We were looking at journals earlier, for example, in Volume 1, when we were looking at, notice, for example, the journals of that early American abolitionist thinker, John Woolman. That idea that we write notes to ourselves. There's so many examples of this that we could mention, obviously, at 3A. We think of all those amazing notes to self. Sometimes autobiographies are published by the writer. Other times, these are notes to self that don't get published until after, long after, in the case of Meditations. Of course, we should point out as well the power of self-talk. We do it all the time anyway. Notice our ideas about jam writing. We write to ourselves. We write to try and take our ideas and put them on the page and then look at them, what we call discovery writing, yes? That idea of it's so powerful to remind ourselves of what really matters. Of course, we should say this as well at 2B. His word pictures are profound, aren't they? I mean, that's a compelling idea. Do the bees want to stay in bed and wrap themselves up in a blanket, or do they get up and go to work? Are you not part of this world? If you are part of this world, the world of nature, then why not behave that way? That's not to say you don't need rest. Of course you need rest. You need your rest. But when your rest is over, it's time to get up and let's go to work. Balance, of course, is everything in that regard. A wonderful word picture, right? Of course, there's bunches and bunches of them. Again, his view that life is like a battlefield, much debated. Is that the right way to look at life? It's this struggle, it's this battle? Or is it rather a better way to look at life as it's this process of being friends and getting along? And of course, we could say, why can't it be both? Because it is both a lot of the time. Sometimes things are going great for us. Other times, not so great. Struggle. At 3A, of course, so many titles come to mind. As we've already said, Plato's Republic is in many ways answered by Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. Now, whether he did it really, really well or not, I mean, some people hold Marcus Aurelius up as almost like a god. I mean, he's like the most amazing man who ever lived. We're not going to say that about him, but what we are going to say is that he lived a pretty remarkable life, given the life he could have lived. And of course, we think about the other terrible emperors like Nero that lived. They had all that power, and look what they did with it. Marcus Aurelius, different kind of guy, and for that we have to accord him some respect, obviously. We think of Thoreau. We've already mentioned Thoreau and Thoreau's Walden. It's a powerful example in American thought of the application of the Stoic philosophy. We think, of course, of the teachings of Christ and of the Buddha, as we've already mentioned, this idea of whatever your hands find to do, do it well, do it with all your might. And of course, we think of of Epictetus, don't we? And the ways in which Stoicism has kind of got this interesting bookends. On the one hand, a slave who has no freedom can say, you're free as you allow yourself to be. And then Marcus Aurelius, who says, even in a palace a man can be free. Even in a palace a man can live well. Whoa, what a challenge. Well, it is a challenge, so let's go there now for 3B. Allow Marcus Aurelius to challenge you. Allow him to say to you, how bad do you really want it? We often think about that word picture, don't we, of the young boy who really wants to learn from the teacher, so the teacher takes him out to the water and puts his head under the water and holds him there until he almost drowns, and the young man can't figure it out, and the teacher says, when you want knowledge the way you wanted air, right? Ball players understand this. Why are you working so hard when you could be sitting at home? Because if I don't train, I don't win. It is that simple. Musicians understand it. Actors understand it. All of us in our life in our own way understand that we've got to hold ourselves to a code. So the obvious question is, what is your code? What principles do you live by? A student recently telling me what they don't believe in. I don't believe in this, the teachings of my parents and all this. And I stopped them and I said, okay, so you know what you don't believe in. What do you believe in? What do you believe in? And can you then, obviously the more profound question, can you live that code? Do you live that code? And when you don't live that code, are you capable of forgiving yourself and getting on with it? Don't lay there and whine and mope because you don't live your code well all the time. None of us do. Marcus Aurelius himself even had his struggles, right? As we all have our struggles. Of course, the final observation is this, and this is my challenge to you. And it's been my challenge from our first lectures with Volume 1 of Ben Franklin's amazing autobiography. Take one or two of these ideas and challenge yourself to try and live with that idea, that principle, for just one day. As we've already said, can you, for example, about anything you're doing, say, I'm going to do this with as much energy, positive energy as I can? Or somebody treats you badly or speaks badly to you. Can you let it go? Can you forgive and move on? Realizing it's over, it's done, it's in the past, and the past doesn't exist anyway. Move on. Again, back to those lines. Stop asking, why is this happening to me? And learn to ask, why is this happening for me? It's not that we want terrible things to happen to us. Oh, not at all. That is not the Stoic philosophy. We want to be happy. We want to be free. But we live in a world, of course, where bad things happen. Can we ask about those bad things? Why did this happen for me? Well, we are finished now with Harvard Classics Volume number 2, and we turn to Volume 3. In our next series of comments, we'll be looking at two amazing British poets, writers, Francis Bacon and John Milton. And about both of those, we are going to say, wow, they again, well, if we can, Marcus Aurelius called it, read carefully, read diligently, read closely, we can maybe gain some insight that can help us to grow, because, of course, in the end, we are part of all that we have met. And as Tennyson will say in Ulysses, the challenge, of course, is to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield, to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bounds of human thought. You smile because, of course, those are lines from an earlier set of comments on Tennyson's Ulysses. But try to internalize that challenge and try and live the best life you can. Marcus Aurelius would say, high five. Thank you.